Everything at Nintendo seems very quiet at the moment, and that is very frustrating for a lot of fans who just want to know what the rest of the year looks like in terms of the games coming from the company. Currently they have no scheduled first party games, especially not system sellers like Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which launched with the console back in 2017. In terms of what we know in terms of first party releases coming from Nintendo in the near or distant future, we've got Metroid Prime 4, we've got Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, and years ago Pikmin 4 was announced, but obviously that's gone very quiet. I think 4 years or so since that was talked about. And off the top of my head, don't think there is too much else. So what could potentially be coming at the end of this year, the end of 2020, or at least what was planned to come until all the current situation sort of broke out? Well, personally, I think it was Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, and I think there's still a high chance that could be the case, and this is why I think so. Before we get into the reasons why I think Breath of the Wild 2 is still coming in 2020, don't forget to subscribe for the channel for more Nintendo related news and gaming news in general, and leave a like if you enjoyed the video and hoping for Legend of Zelda to release this year. So to come to this conclusion, I've basically just been looking at old articles, looking at old rumours and putting everything together, a little bit of a jigsaw to sort of form my opinion on why I think this game might be still launching this year. So Breath of the Wild 2 was originally revealed to be in development back on the 11th of June 2019, so still less than a year ago at this point where we found out that this game was actually a thing and something that was coming to the system. Back when they revealed it, they said that the game was sort of in early development, and they showed a little cutscene that was representing maybe the direction of the game, said it was a bit of a darker feel, still in the same world, still in the same art style, still in the same engine as Breath of the Wild 1. Now that is quite important because being in the same engine probably means it's going to be a lot quicker to develop the game. They don't have to make loads of new assets, they're using the same assets, the same art, everything, and they're just creating a new story in the same sort of engine. So that should mean development for this game should be a lot quicker than the original Breath of the Wild, for example. And one thing to compare this to is going back to Ocarina of Time, which launched in 1998 on the 21st of November originally, and only just over a year and a half later, on the 27th of April 2000, Majora's Mask was released. Now these games are famously in the same engine on the Nintendo 64, and Majora's Mask was sort of like a completely different style of Zelda game that everyone sort of sees it as a different style of game in the same style as Ocarina of Time. A lot of people really like it for that, but it definitely is a different sort of game that is very well reviewed. But anyway, that's irrelevant to the current story. Now these two games, obviously 1 year and a half development between them. I would say it's probably a little bit longer. Obviously I'm guessing they started developing Majora's Mask, maybe at least the concepts or ideas, before Ocarina was actually released. Who knows, I could be wrong on that, I'm just assuming. But yeah, a year and a half between the releases of them. Obviously it was a quick turnaround for the game and the development of the game, and obviously it was a very successful game as well, very well thought of, and a very good game that came out of it. And I am aware that this was on the Nintendo 64, which is probably easier to develop for back then and maybe had quicker development times than the current situation with the current consoles. I know in the past Nintendo have claimed that they do struggle or have struggled with HD development of their games. Initially in the Wii U era, when they sort of moved from the Wii to the Wii U and the games went from sort of standard resolution to HD, they did struggle with that, which they did say. However, I believe that that is not the case anymore, but it's something that still could be taken into consideration with the development times, as well as the fact that they are very polished with what they like to do. They won't put something out, especially not a mainline Zelda game, unless they are 100% happy with it. So that brings us to today, where we are 3 years and just over a month over when Breath of the Wild 1 launched. So we are already twice as long as the gap between Ocarina and Majora's Mask. And I know we only sort of heard about Breath of the Wild 2, which was told that it was in early development last year in E3 in June, but that doesn't mean that was necessarily 100% accurate. That might be just what they were telling us to lower the expectations. They might have been further along than what they were kind of telling us back then. And even if they weren't, even if that was just when they started, by this year's December period or Christmas period, it would have been a year and a half since they told us about the game, which means it would have been a year and a half at least until they start planning the game, which would mean at a minimum, if it does launch this year, it had about the same development time as Ocarina / Majora's Mask. So that's one of my main theories as to why I think it's a very likely possibility we could still see Breath of the Wild 2 this year, because I think it's going to be a lot quicker than people really think to develop, and based on the previous example I've said, it is definitely something that could happen. And with Nintendo liking to keep their release dates sort of short term, they won't tell you when something's coming unless it's short term. It's very likely they might have announced this in E3 this year, which was cancelled, or their Direct, which would have been in E3 this year. But obviously that's now been pushed back according to rumours, which are very well regarded to be believed at this point. But again, that doesn't mean that this isn't coming, or it doesn't mean that it's not maybe slightly delayed, but maybe they just think that as a whole the E3 presentation that they had planned wasn't ready, so they've pushed that back. Not really harming the fact that, okay, they're going to announce a Zelda game in December, but, they can announce that in September instead of in June, for example. They'd still sort of get enough hype around the game to sort of make the sales they want to make. Because the bottom line is they currently have nothing to sell for Christmas. So when this is announced, everyone is going to know about it and everyone is going to want to buy it. So if people have waited this long to want to know what they're going to play on the Switch later this year, they probably could wait a little longer in their eyes, and I think that is fair enough, especially with everything that is going on. So another piece of the jigsaw then is going to the end of last year, where a leaker called Sabi leaked some information on Breath of the Wild 2 and actually stated that the plan was to release the game in 2020. However, they did specify that Zelda games are historically delayed, and this is probably a likely scenario, so didn't want to commit to the fact that it was going to launch this year, just the fact that it was the planned launch, which is kind of what I'm going with as well. Just for a bit of context then, this leaker Sabi has actually been so successful with leaking Nintendo news in the past and previous E3 announcements ahead of the reveal that Nintendo have actually threatened them with legal action because their track record was so good. So though this should be taken with a grain of salt, it is definitely something that is worth considering. Also, another leaker called King Zell had also been claiming for months that the 3D Zelda would be launching in 2020. And let's be fair, at this point I don't think it's another 3D Zelda coming. The only other option would be potentially a remake or a port of maybe one of the past games, which I would guess would be Skyward Sword at this point. Maybe another Ocarina one, but I doubt it because that's been brought to 3DS and Virtual Console many times in the past. Skyward Sword is the one that maybe hasn't been done and is probably the next in line for a port or remake. But we can go back to 2018, November to be precise, to when Nintendo actually squashed any talk of a port of Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword by saying at this time we have no plans to release the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword on Nintendo Switch. And to be fair, that's gone pretty quiet ever since. There's not really any rumours about it now, and there's not really been any talk from Nintendo or anyone inside the industry to say that this game is coming. Not to say that it's not, and they've kept it under wraps, and maybe it's one of their surprise announcements for the end of this year, but I don't think that is going to be the case. So back to the point then, it looks like Breath of the Wild 2 is potentially that game, that 3D Zelda game that was planned to be launched this year. For the next part of the jigsaw then, we go into stay in 2018, where a report by Eurogamer claimed Nintendo is going to be keen on launching a Zelda game every year on the Nintendo Switch. So staying true to that then, we have actually had Breath of the Wild releasing in 2017, Hyrule Warriors releasing in 2018, and Link's Awakening releasing in 2019. Maybe you can say Hyrule Warriors is a bit of a cheat classing it in this, but it is technically a Zelda game, I guess. Not first party, but it's a Zelda game nonetheless, and it released in the year between the other two, so I'm going to include it on the list for that reason. So far this has turned out to be accurate, as we just discovered, and they did also claim there's not been a new 2D Zelda for a while, which is the one that we did receive in 2019. Nonetheless, it received a new art style and look of the game, but The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening was sort of remade on the Nintendo Switch and it's still 2D, and that released last year. So again, you'd think the next one is going to go back to 3D, again backing up this sort of theory even more so. One final thing I would like to add to this sort of jigsaw that I'm creating here is the fact that although Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 1 released in 2017 simultaneously on the Switch and the Wii U, it was heavily delayed for many years before it actually did come out. Many believe, however, that this delay wasn't necessarily because the game wasn't finished, but because the Wii U was sort of a dying console when this game was supposed to be released, and they wanted to keep it being such a good game to launch on their new console as well, to be like the big game to sell it on day one. And to be fair, that did actually work very well for Nintendo. The fact that there wasn't that many other games to buy, but this game actually made people want to pick up the Nintendo Switch on day one. So basically people claimed, and there is substance to the stories, that the game was actually finished long before it did come out, which means if The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 1 was finished before March the 3rd, 2017, it could have been even longer for the second one to have been in development that we may actually realise. So that is something again worth considering when we are considering the launch date of Breath of the Wild 2. So what does that mean for the rest of this year? Obviously we've not seen anything from Nintendo to see what they're going to be doing. We've had Animal Crossing of the last Nintendo game that we know of coming out. We've got a date for. There's literally nothing else. Supposedly that we were supposed to have a Nintendo Direct in March. That was sort of cancelled and postponed. We had the Direct Mini as an alternative, but that wasn't maybe the thing that they originally wanted to give us, and that is because of everything happening with the worldwide pandemic at the moment. So maybe we would have heard something in March if it was to come out this year, or maybe we wouldn't have. The second option then would be the E3 presentation, which would have been in June. Obviously we've recently heard that likelihood is that that is also now cancelled or postponed to later in the summer, and again that could have been the big game that is either shown at the start of the presentation or the one at the end like it was last time, but they give obviously a lot more information. I would say probably at the beginning, because they tend to leave something at the end as a little bit of a surprise, something new for example. Something like a new F-Zero game, that would be pretty cool, but I digress. Let's also consider here that the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X are going to be launching at the end of this year if everything goes to plan for each company. Now I think Nintendo's got two options in terms of competing with the new generation of more powerful consoles. Obviously they're already behind in power with the Switch with the current gen, so they know everyone's going to be focused on the two new mainline sort of home consoles. I guess, Nintendo they have got a home console with the Switch, but it's a hybrid, it's its own thing, it's got its own market. So the mainline two home consoles, the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, are coming out this year. Everyone's going to be focused on them. How can they compete? How can they still sell games for the Switch during this launch period? I'm not saying the Switch is going to become irrelevant as soon as they launch, but in the launch period people will be saving up money currently to pick up one of them when they come out, which means they probably won't be able to pick up maybe many Switch games, or that's not something they're going to be looking at directly this sort of Christmas period. So I think Nintendo probably originally planned to release, a big hitter like Breath of the Wild 2 to compete on that front. So yes, okay, they want to buy the new consoles, to something people really want. However, people also really want a new Zelda game, following on from what some consider the best ever Zelda game, Breath of the Wild. So that gives them a decision to make. Can they afford to do both, or does with the console wait? Maybe there's not enough games out for the Xbox now, and I'll pick up Breath of the Wild because I know that will take me a good few weeks to finish, and then by the time I finish that I'll be able to afford the Xbox, and Halo will also be out then by the time I do so, for example. But I think that is one of the only games Nintendo could release that will actually compete with the new console launch of Xbox and PlayStation, especially out the ones that we know are coming. I don't even think Metroid Prime 4 would do the same job, because the audience for Metroid is far smaller than it is for Zelda. You saw the power of Breath of the Wild 1 when that came out and sold the Switch, and the Switch has had such a sort of head kickstart from that and it's done well ever since. Compare that to maybe the launch of the Wii U. Would the same thing have happened? Potentially, who knows, but they didn't release a game to the same sort of standard with the Wii U, so we'll never know that. But still, people were skeptical of the Switch. This game released and helped sort of kick it off in the right direction. So could this do it again, but competing with two other console launches at the same time, just to keep them ticking over, just to keep them sort of relevant? I think that is the idea. They know they're probably not going to outsell, or it's not going to be, the Switch isn't going to be the be all and end all this Christmas because of those two launches, but you could sneak Zelda in there to sort of keep it relevant and keep it in the sort of conversation. So I believe that was the original plan, at least for Nintendo. Whether or not it's the current plan or not, I'd like to think it still is, and that's why they're being so quiet, because they want to release it, or announce the release date at least, and sort of build hype, and they want to do it like, okay, I know we've been quiet, but this is why, because we've got this coming and you're all going to love it. That's what I feel like they're going to do. However, I am quite realistic in the option that potentially they might be taking a more quieter approach and saying, look, okay, the other two consoles are coming out, it's going to be hard to sort of compete with them at this point. We've had a tough year with the stuff going on around the world. Maybe we'll have to sort of postpone things, take a step back and sort of take the hit this Christmas, because we know it's going to be difficult anyway, and they won't actually release anything big. They released a couple of little things to keep us ticking, people who are going to pick the games up, but maybe leave the big releases like this until next year, when maybe all the hype and everyone is initially going to buy the new consoles has done so and has died down a bit, and sort of re-enter into the conversation, so it becomes, like it is now, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch, but obviously with the PS5 and the Series X and the Switch. Because the bottom line is, it's always going to be hard to compete with new consoles with your current console. I know it's different now and they have their own sort of cycle where Nintendo release a new console. It's not necessarily the three of them releasing it at the same time. Nintendo have gone on their own route, but during this year where the others release new consoles, it is always going to be harder for them to compete. So that is a realistic possibility that might happen, and we won't get anything major from Nintendo this year. And I think the fact of the virus in the world at the moment as well might have impacted this decision, maybe going from the fact we will launch something to compete to, okay, we're just going to let them have their day and we'll start again next year. But we don't know anything yet about what's coming, and it's all speculation at this point. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think we're going to actually have a Nintendo Direct where we're going to learn some stuff about the end of this year, or they're going to maybe just wait and then just start afresh next year? Let me know in the comments below what you think. I'd be interested to see your view on the matter and whether we're actually going to get Breath of the Wild 2 this year as well. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, to subscribe to the channel for more news on Nintendo and other gaming hot topics, where I also share my opinions, and leave a like, because that actually also supports the channel massively and helps me grow and allow me to make more content as well, and also tells me that you like the sort of video that I'm currently making. And whilst you're here, check out the two videos on the screen now. One of them is recommended by YouTube for you, the other one is my latest upload. Thank you all for watching, and I shall see you in the next video.